So for this video and the next video, we are going to talk about physical components of Active Directory, and then we are going to talk about the logical components of Active Directory. So I am only going to introduce concepts and ideas that pertain. On the logical side, I am going to introduce some concepts and ideas that are out of scope for this, but I think are still important. But for the physical side, I am going to limit it to what's in scope as to not confuse you or make things any more complicated, because Active Directory can run really deep really fast. So we are going to give a high level overview, and then it will make a lot more sense when we start building things out. So let's talk about two very important physical Active Directory components. So the very most important Active Directory component is what is called a domain controller. So if you never heard of a domain controller, that is the boss of all the servers, right? When you set up Active Directory, you have what is called a domain controller. Now the domain controller has a lot of features that it provides and does for the environment. It hosts what is called the Active Directory Domain Services Directory Store, meaning it hosts your phone book. Remember we talked about it being a phone book. It has all the information on the users, the computers or printers in the network, etc. It knows everything. On top of this, it's providing authentication and authorization. So going back to the last video when we talk about Kerberos, it's doing that at the domain controller level. And if we are in what is called a forest or in a domain where we have a parent-child situation, which we are going to talk about in the logical side of things, it does replication, so that way the other forest or other domains, when you make an update to one item in one domain controller, it update across the board. Now we will talk about that here in just a second. But also we have administrative access with the domain controller. So that is to manage user accounts and network resources. As you are going to see when we build our domain controller, what we do is we go in there, and this is where we can add users, this is where we can add our computers, where we can add policies, where we can do all different sort of things. We do it at the domain controller level. So when we talk about domain controller, again it's the boss, it is the authority. When we attack an internal network, it's very bad if we can compromise your domain controller, because that means we can compromise the whole network potentially. So depending on how big the network is, if it's just one domain and we compromise the domain controller, we have compromised everything. Okay, so this is one of the top targets when you are doing an internal test assessment, though it's not the only target. And I should note, do not get your eyes set on just doing domain controller compromise, and that being it when it comes to Active Directory pen testing or internal pen testing. There's other information that clients might want as well. Think about potentially PII or personally identifiable information, especially if it's related to like social security numbers or sensitive information about people. Think about any kind of credit card information that might be obtained. Think about of any kind of proprietary information that you might be able to obtain as well. So don't just go for domain admin or compromising the domain controller. Think beyond that. Think what could you do as an attacker that would be really damaging to a client. Now from here, let's also talk about Active Directory data store. So the big takeaway from the Active Directory data store is that it holds this file called the NTDS.dit, DIT, okay? And this file is very sensitive. Now typically, when you compromise a domain controller, you want to grab this file. Why do we want to grab this file? Well, it contains everything that is stored in Active Directory data. That means all the users, the objects, the group, etc. Most importantly, it contains password hashes for all users in this domain. So when you compromise the domain controller and then you go get the ntds.dit file, guess what? You have got all the password hashes. It doesn't mean you have all the password, but you have the hashes. You can take them offline and try to crack them. You can attempt pass the hash attacks. You can attempt golden ticket attacks with the hash. And I know you might not know what all these are right now, but we are going to see why compromising this NTDS file will lead to amazing things as an attacker for us when we get into the attacking side of things. So that's all I want you to take away from this. I want you to take away these two components, a domain controller and the data store, because the domain controller is one of our primary targets as an attacker. This is that is the big shot, right? We want to attack it, we want to compromise it because that's where all the data is stored. That's what's doing our authentication. That is where everything about anything is there, and we are going to live inside of the domain controller for a while. When we are doing our lab build, we set everything up, we set up our policies. You are going to get a good feel for what exactly you can do on a domain controller. And then know the data store. The data store has this NTDS file, and the file includes all information from Active Directory data, including password hashes. Big thing to remember. So that's it from here. We are going to talk quickly about logical items, and then we are going to move on to building our lab, which is going to be super